Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. If we think we've seen tough times, just look at our opponents this week and their fan base. Rutgers has been wandering through the football desert for a long time. Now at 1-3, they feel like they are on a better path with light ahead. Our guest today is award-winning sports columnist Steve Politi from the Newark Star Ledger. First, my view from Section 17 to get us started, as always. I don't know if it's age or what. I've learned to be more accepting recently of our losses and where we are as a program. Now, that doesn't mean I like it. I just don't go into a funk for 7 days after a loss like I used to for most of my life. Although my wife might disagree. She hides on Saturdays and leaves me alone. She'll check the scores from time to time, though, just to get a feeling for how her Sunday is going to go. And I don't like being accepting of losses either. Like so many of you, I was spoiled most of my life by a Michigan program that was striving for excellence, and more often than not, it delivered. These last 10 years have been a true test of my patience, though. Rich Rod, Brady, and now Jim Harbaugh. They have failed to recapture our glory years. And at times I wonder, will we ever get back to competing for a Big Ten championship or beat Ohio State? As always, though, I do snap out of it, especially during game week. And then I start to focus on the task at hand. It's quite simple right now. We're not a good team. As Jim Harbaugh might say, we're not good at football. Is it coaching, the youth, the lack of fire from our players? I'm not sure. What I know is I'm not going to quit, and they won't either. The turnaround has to start somewhere, so let's get it rolling Saturday night in Piscataway. My guest today says Rutgers fans are thrilled they are even competitive this year. They live in hope that the return of Greg Schiano will breathe life into their program and make them a team to reckon with at some point in the Big Ten future. My guest today is cynical, but he thinks Schiano might be the guy to do just that. Award-winning columnist Steve Politi from the Newark Star Ledger joins me next on this week's Visitors Edition of the Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on our visitors segment this week, Steve Politi from the Newark Star Ledger, NewJersey.com. Steve, wonderful to have you back on the show.
Anytime, Mike. I appreciate it.
Well, in this crazy COVID year of college football, we enter Week 5 in the Big Ten, and Michigan heading, of course, to Rutgers for a Saturday night game, BTN broadcasting. A lot going on for Rutgers this year. Greg Schiano is back, where he spent 11 years previously as head coach. I know time will tell, but bringing him back, Steve, sure seems like a good move, doesn't it?
Well, certainly it's exceeded their expectations so far. If you followed Rutgers football the last few years, they weren't merely a bad football team. They were just rock bottom terrible, and they couldn't compete against anybody in the Big Ten. So for this season to start, not only with the team being competitive, but by beating Michigan State. And I get it, it's not a great Michigan State team, but again, it doesn't matter for Rutgers at this stage. It's a Big Ten win. It ended their 21-game conference losing streak. He's had a good deal of success in recruiting, and he was smart to inject a lot of talent through the transfer portal that gave this team, a much better footing in his first year. So, people are, very pleased. Not a great loss to Illinois last week, but overall, I think given where this program was the previous, 3 or even 4 years, a lot of people are very happy with things now.
Well, it is early in his return, but do you sense a big difference in the attitude around the program with Greg back in charge?
Oh, there's no question. Yeah, they're trying to win games. That sounds ridiculous to make that a statement, but you saw what happened in very aggressive playing on offense and defense in the opener against Michigan State, and even against teams that are much more talented in Indiana and Ohio State. It was clear that they weren't going to win those games, but you just saw, a lot of trick plays, a lot of creativity. They didn't give up in the second half, down 35-3 against Ohio State, and that's something that this team had. They've rolling over pretty quickly in a lot of those games. I think there certainly is a renewed confidence about the program. They're still not a good football team, but you can tell that the attitude is much different than it was the last few years. There's not a defeated attitude about the players.
Yeah, and some Rutgers fans I've talked to look at Schiano the same way I think Michigan fans looked at Jim Harbaugh 6 years ago. If you can't win with him, who can you win with? And at least for now, he has buoyed the spirits of the fan base and the alums, hasn't he?
Yeah, I certainly think so. And it was funny, I wrote after they lost again. They really should have won against Illinois last week. I wrote a column saying, that this feeling of getting punched in the gut after a tough loss is better than the feelings that they've had in recent years where there's, you're just walking out of the stadium indifferently at halftime because there's just no chance that you knew they weren't going to compete when you got there. You were not, your expectations were met by the game. They lost to Illinois last year 38-10. It was never close, So the fact that it's competitive again, the fact that we're debating football things, right? Like a decision to throw a pass on first down, like get intercepted. Fans are angry about that. My point to them was like, well, last year, you couldn't even have this discussion because the team wasn't good enough to allow you to even, think about football strategy. They just got their butts kicked every week. So I do think there certainly is a different level of enthusiasm with Rutgers fans right now.
I think the big bonus is going to be in the recruiting. New Jersey is just a talent hotbed, and he's already putting together a good class, isn't he?
Yes, he's done a good job, and he's going after positions of need, which until was something wasn't happening necessarily, in the program before. He's making inroads with good players in the state, and that's something that's going to take a while. I think the first class is better than anything that Chris Ash had when he was here. But obviously to really get this team to a point where, okay, you're competing for bowls, you're in the conversation where they want to be in the top 25. The class after this class, next few classes are going to have to, even take another level up. But certainly it's off to a very good start.
Well, Rutgers is 1-3 heading into Saturday's action, the same record as Michigan. A big difference to me, though, in those records is that Rutgers has been competitive in just about every game, haven't they?
Well, yeah. Obviously the Ohio State game got out of hand early, but the fact they came back and they played hard in the second half, I think the thing that people took away from these games, like they lost Indiana, and again, it was another game that really wasn't in doubt, but all the highlights were the crazy lateral play where, Rutgers at the end of the game was just trying to stay alive and had to score the touchdown that got reversed after 9 different laterals. But still, in fact, people were talking about, oh, look at Rutgers. Look at they're doing something interesting. I think was a good way of, changing the narrative about the team. And, so I get that 1-3, is disappointing, certainly, and people are going crazy in Ann Arbor, 1-3, and Piscataway is a different story entirely.
Well, last year, Arthur Sitkowski was the starting quarterback when Rutgers came to Ann Arbor, and I think he redshirted right after the Michigan game.
He did, yes.
Yeah, and as of now, Nebraska grad transfer Noah Vedral is the man under center. Is that how you pronounce his last name, Vedral?
Vedral, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking at his numbers, he's 82 for 130. He has 5 TDs, 7 picks. Your thoughts on what he's brought to the team this year?
Yeah, no, he is. He's a limited passer. He's very accurate. Doesn't have a strong arm, but he certainly has a firm grasp of the offense. They like that. And you got to remember, this is a team that last season had some just historically bad passing performances. I mean, I think they had 1 yard in a game against Maryland. I mean, just some things you look back and you're like, how in the world did that even happen? Now. Granted, he threw 3 interceptions in the second half against Illinois. I probably cost them the game, but 249 yards passing for this program. Greg Schiano said in his press conference, like, look, we get it that it hasn't been perfect, but it's better than at any time, that the team's been in the Big Ten since those first couple of years where they had Leonte Carew and a couple other players who went professionally. Now they are at least competent offensively. He makes good decisions at the line of scrimmage. He's gotten Bo Melton, who was a 4-star receiver, a kid who until this point had been a disappointing player, but now 4 touchdowns so far this year, a couple of 100-yard games. He's really showing the potential people thought he would have. You're just seeing life from the offense, and I think that's what Vedral's done so far. I know some fans were thinking that maybe they make a change this week after the 3 interceptions in the second half, but Greg Schiano's sticking with him, and I think that's a clear sign that he won the job decisively in the offseason.
Yeah, and you mentioned the receiving corps. They put up some decent numbers. Aaron Cruikshank, 21 grabs. Bo Melton, as you mentioned, 19. He had a very good year last year. Shameen Jones and Aaron Young had 12 catches, as does Pacheco out of the backfield. So the receiving corps is very solid this year, isn't it? It's
getting better, yeah. They still don't have the playmakers that Rutgers used to have. I mean, during Schiano's heyday, every year it seemed like they had a Kenny Britt or a Mohamed Sanu. I mean, guys who were still in the pros. That sort of became part of what made this program great. They were always producing wide receivers. They still don't have that level of player, but it is a definite improvement. And you mentioned Isaiah Pacheco. I think that they like to get him involved a lot more. You've seen he's got the ability, obviously he did against Michigan last year, I believe, to break off long runs. And if they get him involved in the passing game and he runs north-south against behind what has been a much better offensive line too, then I think that would be where they'd want the focus of the offense to go.
Yeah, Isaiah Pacheco's had some really nice games against Michigan. I know he's leading the way with 291 yards on 56 carries right now. Every time I've seen him, at least against Michigan, he's been very impressive. He runs hard. As you mentioned, he can break the big ones. Big bonus, catches the ball real well out of the backfield. Just a really solid player.
Yeah, Greg Schiano likes it. He says he runs angry, which is which is what you see. And I think what they want from him really now is to become more of a north-south runner. I think they need him to just hit that hole and go, stop being shifty behind. And it does make a big difference that an offensive line last year that was just really, I thought this was going to be the biggest weakness on the team. The line play was a strength against Illinois. I mean, they blocked well. The Vedra had a lot of time. The running game was very good, again, in that win. So I think that, now I don't know if it's going to be as easy against, obviously, an elite defense like Michigan, but, I think that's what you're starting to see, that this hopefully will become the identity of the team where they will not have to rely on Vedral to make as many throws.
As you mentioned, the offensive line has been surprisingly good. Only 2 starters, I believe, returned from last year. They have allowed 7 sacks, but as a group, is it fairly young up front?
It is, yeah. I mean, they're working. They worked in one true freshman this past week as a starter. They've got some guys coming back from injuries. They lost a guy, Mike Maetti, who transferred, who was probably their best lineman, who transferred to Missouri in the offseason. But so far the tackles have been great, including kid Raekwon O'Neal at left tackle. I think he's probably been one of their most improved players. And he's the kid. I don't know if you saw the exciting end game, the end play, the lateral play against Indiana. He was the one who threw the ball over his head like a wedding bouquet that made all the headlines. So, and he also caught a touchdown pass the next week against Ohio State. So he's been sort of everywhere. He's kind of been the most interesting man on the team in a lot of ways. But the line play has been better than they've expected, certainly.
Well, over on the defense, 8 starters returned from last year, and a couple of transfers were added into the mix, including Michael Dwumfor from Michigan. How has he played so far?
He's been great. I mean, he's been exactly what they hoped. A guy who went from a rotational player with a smaller role at Michigan to someone they need on the field as much as possible here. He's been he's gotten strong up front.
Mm-hmm.
And that defensive line, again, that was another weakness that last year, I think now is something that's probably the most improved facet of the team. Until a poor game against Illinois and a running quarterback, they were actually very good against the run. With Dwumfor and then Julius Turner at nose, I think they have 2 good ends, including, so they've been able to get to the quarterback with Mike Tverdoff, who's a legacy guy whose brother played for the program. That's been a much better part of the team than certainly last year.
And behind them, the linebacking core, experienced, led by Tyshawn Fogg, who really has looked good when I've seen him. And help me with this one. His partner in crime back there is Olakunle Fatukasi.
Yes, 03 as he's called here, which is much easier than trying to pronounce that.
Yeah.
And he might be the best player on the team this year. Certainly the best player in the defense. He looks like a guy who's going to be drafted in 3rd, 4th round. His brother plays for the Jets now, so the family, football family, talented. He has been both good against the run and going after the quarterback, sort of like the heart of that defense. But overall, the linebackers, they thought the linebackers were going to be a strength, and certainly so far. They've played up to their capability.
And then the secondary is led by Christian Eisen. He was 3rd on the team in tackles last year. Corner Avery Young is back, and then you have an Ohio State transfer in Brendan White joining the group. How would you describe the secondary play so far, Steve?
It's been mixed. Brendan White did not play last week. He was hurt, and I think if he were back there, he would have been a little bit better against the run. It's just been hit or miss. I don't think they have enough depth at cornerback, which obviously, when you play college football in 2020 and you face a lot of teams that like to spread it out, that's going to be a problem. But Avery Young, certainly he had a very good start to the year. I think he's got a couple of interceptions. When Brendan White's healthy, I thought he obviously, and he's a Rose Bowl MVP who knows Greg Schiano, its defenses very well. So he was an important cog of that. But this certainly, I think the secondary has been a work in progress.
Well, for Rutgers fans, I'm sure they will be happy if they see improvement in year one, Steve, after what they've seen for the last decade or so. And from what I've seen, and I got to see the Illinois game last week and then bits and pieces of some others, they at least look like a team playing with a lot of attitude and fire, which is quite different from the last few years.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I think that's been certainly the biggest takeaway so far from this year. I think I wrote after the Michigan State game, if Greg Schiano had 8 things he needed to accomplish, he checked off 6 of the boxes right there.
Yeah.
He ended the Big Ten losing streak. He showed that you can compete with these teams in the East Division. So now what's the next 4 games going to be? All right, so you have Michigan and Penn State, 2 teams that on paper certainly are having terrible seasons by their standards. But still, they're at this stage, I think they're more talented than Rutgers. It's going to be hard to win those games. And then you have Purdue and Maryland, who are probably having better seasons than you would have expected going into this year. So, it's going to be tricky to see if they can squeeze another win out of this before the bonus game. But overall, this has never been a year that you were going to look at the win-loss record for Rutgers, and that was going to be the guide of how the season unfolded. So, I think you're going to look at progress, and you're right. They're a much better team than they were last year.
Well, this Saturday night, it's a primetime game on BTN, and both teams really could use a W, no doubt about it. And I would think Rutgers, though, scouting Michigan and, me having seen all of Michigan's games, I have to think that the staff thinks they have a pretty good chance to get it done this weekend, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested, to see what's going to happen. I mean, my and this has been my hesitation with picking when I have to pick Rutgers throughout the year. I'm constantly thinking about what happened in years past, and I think the last 5 meetings between Michigan and Rutgers is something about to the tune of 52-7. So, that in mind, even with Michigan having a bad year and all the heat on Jim Harbaugh, I do wonder if this is a wounded animal back in the corner, as Greg Schiano described Illinois the week before. If that's going to make it hard for them to. Certainly Michigan not going to come here and take this one lightly.
Well, 2020 has been a crazy year, as we all know, on so many levels. And you can say the same thing about the Big Ten season so far. As we all know, Michigan's looked horrible. Penn State winless. Northwestern and Indiana playing really well. And it's been entertaining, but it's an upside-down year in the Big Ten, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I wonder how much that late start, not having the non-conference season and sort of the on-again, off-again things with training camp had impacted some teams. Now I'll be very curious to see what happens to a program like Penn State. Are you going to start seeing the opt-outs, or are now you're 0-4, you're going to start – are players going to leave the program? Are they going to go completely in the wrong direction? And the same with Michigan. To a lesser degree, I think, but I'm curious to see what kind of effort they have when they come out this week. Is this a team that can adjust its goals and recognize that going on a run and finishing 5-3 and 6-3 and then getting into a good bowl game is a good season, or are they also looking at the situation where, why bother? So it'll be interesting to see how the next 4 games shake out.
Well, the big game in the conference this week is Indiana down at Ohio State, and both teams have played Rutgers, so you've seen them. Do you think Indiana has a prayer of winning down in Columbus?
I certainly think it's going to be a competitive game. I'm really impressed with Indiana, and I knew they were a well-coached team, but they're very talented too. They've got Penix Jr. is a good quarterback, accurate thrower. They've got a lot of talent at wide receiver. They're certainly very good defensively. I think most people would agree that Ohio State's on a different level of talent, but let's not forget they've had one game a year, Ohio State, where they just the last few years where they just haven't showed up. So I don't know what having the week off how that would have affected the Buckeyes last week. I think it's going to be a close game. Absolutely, I think Ohio State will win, but. No, I was very impressed with Indiana.
Well, a final question for you, Steve, before we let you get away. And this goes back to where we started with Coach Greg Schiano. The second time around, they're in your gut. Do you think this time he's going to be the guy and he's going to get Rutgers competitive in the Big Ten East?
I do. And, there's different levels of competitive. I think that, it's clear that he's going to make that first step a lot quicker than people probably expected. I think, even next year, they've gotten to the point now where if they beat Michigan State, so they're on even footing with Michigan State, and they should be on even footing with Maryland. They should play a full non-conference schedule where, you can see this team, you get to 6-6, 7-5, and start going back to bowl games. Obviously the big question is, all right, so how do you make that step where you're, competing against when you're Michigan, when you can beat them, half the time, and get to the point where, okay, now you're in the top 25 and you're doing what Indiana's doing. So I think that's going to be a harder step to take, and then the final one, I just don't, I don't know how many, if you play Ohio State 50 years, how many times Rutgers is going to win. I don't know. I don't think people in Piscataway are worried about that, though. If you can just get to the point where there's no 78-0 scores anymore, where the games are interesting, where they're competitive against the teams they should be competitive with, where they go to bowl games, where it's something you can be proud of, then I think Greg Schiano's done his job.
Well, it's going to be an interesting game Saturday night in Piscataway. Rutgers on the upswing, Michigan really needing a W, national TV, so we'll see what happens. Here with us on our Visitors Edition today has been Steve Politi from the Newark Star Ledger, NewJersey.com. Steve, always a pleasure to have you on the show. We thank you for being so gracious with your time and look forward to that next visit.
No problem, Mike. Thanks for having me.
On Quick Hits today, no injury updates from Jim to report. So here are a few notes of interest for you. Michigan leads this series with 5 wins against 1 loss. That loss came in the first meeting on October 4th, 2014, in another Saturday night game at Piscataway. Rutgers 26, Michigan 24. And who can forget the celebration? The students stormed the field and celebrated as if they'd won the Big Ten championship. We won big at home last year, 52-0 on September 28th. Greg Schiano is in his 12th year overall as head man at Rutgers with a record of 69-70. They returned 7 starters on offense and 8 on defense. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2014 Quick Lane Bowl, a 40-21 win over North Carolina. Again, they are 1-3 heading into this weekend's game. The weatherman says it's going to be a beautiful day in Jersey, sunny and upper 60s. Temperatures at game time will be somewhere in the mid-40s, and we are supposed to remain dry. What will happen this Saturday night, we just don't know. When you're a young team, getting better takes time and hard work. So let's hope the coaching staff and this young team are on the same page this week and ready to do whatever it takes to get a W in Jersey. It does not have to be pretty, but this team needs a shot of confidence and to feel better about themselves. In the end, it is up to them. That will do it for another week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Next week, we return home to do battle with Penn State, and who would have guessed they would be winless at this point of the season? On Tuesday's Michigan Game Day show, my scheduled guest is beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. On Thursday's Visitors Edition, we'll be joined by longtime Penn State radio play-by-play voice Steve Jones, so make sure you join us for that. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat Rutgers. Until we meet again next week, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!